Good afternoon. Welcome to St. James Episcopal Church. It is such a pleasure to host you for this town hall. I'm the Reverend Eileen O'Brien. I'm the rector here at St. James, and it is a delight to welcome you. A couple things. Bathrooms are out that way, so if you go out and take a left and go down the hall, you will find bathrooms. If at the end of our time together, we're going to head over to the Founders Hall, which is the building back here for a reception. And so we hope that you will join us for that reception over here in Founders Hall. And Bishop, it's just wonderful to have you here. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you very much. So it's good to be with you all, and thank you for coming today. This is the last of my 360s for this season, and we've already been around the diocese, visiting with folks like yourself, really sharing what we've accomplished during our time together as bishop and people, and also looking at who we've become during this time period and imagining where we're going. So that's really the purpose today. And I'm hoping that you all will have some conversations. Maybe know more about. Or maybe I skirt over something that seems really important to you. I want to make sure that we take time together. Pieces of our time together where I'll highlight some of the uniqueness that's part of Austin. So we undertook that, 100 individuals, and where they were able to participate into a deep dive of questions. Look at some of the results. Not all of the results, but just some of them, and then I'll show you some of the highlights. Now, what you're going to notice immediately is you will not be able to read everything on the slide, okay? Deep breath for those of us who have control and need to read everything on the slide. I release you in this season of Lent from the requirement of reading everything on the slide. Because you are who you are, this will be on the website, all the information. It's really more for me to make sure, on the one hand, I cover the things I need to cover, and on the other hand, if you were to go look at it, you would have the things I'm telling you out loud, right? So that's a big piece of it. The second part is to look at the aspirational goals that we had for one another when I became bishop. And they're aspirational because they were not measurable. They weren't, we can reflect on them and we can feel good about count. And so some of the way in which we hold ourselves to account and to be responsive to those goals have changed over the years. But I want to begin with those goals that were set back in 2008 and really look at how we've come. And the last part is just a brief piece. 14 years, which is hard to imagine, actually. And this gives you a sense of some of the other bishops that have served the Diocese of Texas. And what's strange for me is to think about my tenure in relationship to the 3 bishops who I grew up with in the diocese, right? And these kind of giants in the diocese for good or bad. I, as a child, looked up to and, came into contact with at summer camp, things like that. So I am curious, is there anybody in the room that was confirmed by Bishop Quinn? No? Okay. So interestingly, only 8 people out of almost 1,000 people stood up and said they were confirmed by Bishop Quinn over the last couple of weeks. How about Bishop Hines? Yeah, a couple for Hines. How about Richardson? Anybody for Richardson? Yeah, over here. And how about for Benitez? How many of you are confirmed under Benitez? A few. And then Bishop Payne. Bishop Payne. Ooh. And how about Bishop Wimberly? Yeah. How about Bishop Silly? Anybody for Bishop Silly? That's a real bishop, by the way. I'm not making that up. Bishop Goddard? No? Gordon Charlton? Bishop Charlton? Yay, Charlton over here. And how about Bishop Jeff Fisher? How about Bishop Kay Ryan? How about... Okay, right. So this is what's interesting. The majority of everybody who has come to these is from somewhere else. So think about that. So those of us who've been around a long time and kind of inherited this diocese, we have to realize that we sit amongst the majority of individuals who came from someplace else. Confirmed, maybe baptized by people. There's like a world outside the Diocese of Texas, evidently. Who knew that? That's crazy. This is another way to think about it. So on the left-hand side are my 2 girls on the day of the consecration, and that's them on the right side last week. So, I don't know how they got so old and we all stayed so young, but there it is. I want to say first that even as we get ready to look at all of this, you all are amazing to work with. I told a priest yesterday, he's retired now, and we were doing some pastoral work. He was concerned about a friend. And he said, I can't believe this. I said, well, the truth is that when I first started, I thought that this was somehow going to be mostly about everybody else. And what I've discovered is it's about our relationship together and the sweetness that we've arrived at over 14 years. And doesn't mean that we don't have hard and difficult questions to face still, or that things won't challenge us in the future, but we've kind of arrived at a place where I'm me and you're you, and we can do this work together. And it's been an amazing ride, and there are many of you in this room that have been tremendous gifts to me in my life, in my ministry. So I'm grateful for that. You are an amazing group of people doing amazing things. The review was overwhelmingly positive, so I'll just kind of jump into it. You'll see a couple different things. Up at the top, you see the question, knows itself. Are we a diocese that knows ourself? Do we have a sense of who we are in our kind of widest, most diverse sense? Do we know who we are regarding kind of our DNA and our history? Do we know the things that need to change? And this is what this question is trying to get at. And 92% of the folks responded. And the reason for that is that we poll all the leaders involved in diocesan ministry. Not all the leaders are Episcopalian. So not all the leaders feel as though they can respond on every specific question. So you'll actually see the respondents go up and down as we go. 2014 was the last time we did this, and you can see that we did a slightly better, feeling as though over time we are certainly getting to a place where we know each other and ourselves better. Are we a learning culture? Are we a culture that wants to try new things and learn from our failure? Are we willing to fail? Do we look for other resources outside of ourselves? Or do we look for other specialists to come in and teach us? and there was a sense that we also are doing this better. And I think that's a big shift for us. I think that coming in, there was very much a pedagogical model in the diocese of we know best, we're Texas, and the truth is we just don't know it all. So hard to tell you all that, right? But we don't, evidently, and so it takes us actually partnering with other people from outside to help us learn how to do our work better. And that's a big piece of what we've stretched towards. Are we transforming lives? So this is another area where we did well. There is a sense that at the congregational level, we are beginning to move outside of our kind of island parishes as a group and do transformational work. There's a sense that we are doing transformational work in our parishes, right? That also is happening at the same time. But what was interesting in the kind of questions that came as comments here was that there wasn't a sense that we knew what other people were doing. So there's a sense that we're doing good work, but we don't really know all the stories. And we think we might benefit from sharing more. Now, we had done an audit on communications a few years ago, so we are trying to share more stories about the good work that we're doing. I'm going to share some today with you. But it is to say that we feel like we're headed in that direction, but there's a lot more we could do probably. And how is it that it's our work and not somebody else? You know, how do we discern all of that? So I think we're in a good place here, but certainly some need to communicate is what I heard. So this is the larger scheme of all of the questions that were asked. And probably for full transparency, I need to just tell you that when I was first elected and we did this 360 conversation, the thing that you all, it was very clear, the thing that was the worst thing we did was communications. I mean, we couldn't win on a communication question if we tried. When I came back in 2014 to say, this is what we've been doing, what do you think? Again, communications received the lowest score, and it received the highest score. So we felt like maybe we were starting to do some things, right? But we felt like this audit's going to really help us. So that gives you a sense we've moved up a little bit in the communications, but still have some way to go. But you can see kind of where we have to work. And I'll just say that this conversation is really important, whether we have it out loud or over our time in Founders Hall. Last time I did this, it was clear we needed to reorganize the staff and rethink how we delivered ministry in a collaborative way with you, as opposed to kind of this retail, you know, they used to say retail wholesale, right? That's a terrible way to think about ministry. Actually, what we want to think about is collaborative ministry and putting resources, financial and human, in the congregations, which we're doing today. So it gives you a sense, this is very important for us to listen. So our aspirational goals, to be one church. Now, those of you who were around when I was elected may remember the General Convention before that in Arizona that we were deeply divided in this diocese in 2008 over gender and sexuality. And it just was, it was bad. And we had a clear sense that we wanted to be one church, but nobody really knew how to be one church. Like, so that was beyond us. And part of the issue was the divide on those issues. And I had made a commitment that I was not going to push us into anything. That if we were going to deal with this, we were going to deal with this, because it wasn't my problem. It was our thing to wrestle with. So as we look at that, we brought 50 individuals together. We worked with Secretary Baker, and as many of you know, we ended up allowing same-sex marriage in the diocese before Texas ratified it, and then have just kind of continued that process. We have 160 congregations, many more than 21 clergy do same-sex marriage or marriage, And right, I mean it's kind of weird to kind of go back and use the language we were using at this time, but who do marriage for folks beyond just the binary marriage that we were doing. And so we have about 20 congregations that now do it, and a couple more here in Austin thinking about it. So that process is really moving and continue to move. And the results have really been profound. We haven't lost any more congregations. People have begun to see that Texas is not kind of a monolith of traditionalism, but that we're actually just as diverse as everybody else, and that there are places for all people here to minister and to welcome. We got rid of Canon 43, which was our big kind of wrestling piece, which forbade LGBTQ folks to minister as clergy in the diocese. So we got rid of that. And so it just kind of magically disappeared one night. And, and I'll tell you, we've been a model for the rest of the Episcopal Church. Some 18 dioceses used our work to start their own, and 3 provinces from around the communion used this to start their own work. So it's just to say that we took on something that was big, and we figured out a way to live together. And there was another way in which, well, this is me and the presiding bishop, just to show you how much love there is between us. I said, Bishop Michael, I got to make a presentation. Let me take this picture. He said, okay, just one. Don't let me ever see you this close again. But we're good friends. And our leadership here has really been important because it's allowed us to partner with the rest of the Episcopal Church in offering, helping with needs that other bishops and other dioceses have. And so our leadership in the wider church, from all the bishops, from the people that go to General Convention, from our own stewardship and our relationships, is really improved and is profound, and much like it was during the time of Richardson and before. It's just very, very healthy. Here's a picture of me with Justin Welby, and the same can be said here. We have a good relationship, an open relationship. They called a couple of weeks ago, and the Bishop of South Sudan, who's been confirming people and then getting on a bicycle and riding day and night to get to another place. And the Archbishop of Canterbury called and said, we really think this person needs a vehicle in order to be safe out there and to take, so he can survive this. So we worked with another diocese in providing that. So again, collaboration and that kind of wider Anglican ability. We just helped, I don't understand the technology of this, but there's an eye machine that can help prevent blindness in children if they get tested right after they're born. And so we just helped you all and our stewardship here helped to purchase one of those so that it'll go into an eye hospital in the Gaza Strip and prevent blindness in children born there. So again, our leadership is healthy and well. These are just to give you some transparent look at the dollars that go to the different entities. We send about $1 million a year and about $1.5 million outside of ourselves to this kind of work. The other piece of this was when I began, there was a lot of discussion about maybe the diocese should split and the Diocese of Austin should become a diocese, and then Houston could go its own, and East Texas, because they're all pretty sure they're not the same. I don't hear much of that anymore, though. And I think that's just the gift of working and seeing people from all over the diocese serve in our committees and our commissions and our boards, and really coming together to lead the diocese as opposed to being just part of one geographic area. We wanted to be more diverse, and a couple of big pieces to that were that we had less than 8% of our clergy were women, and less than 1% were clergy of color at the time in which I became bishop. Certainly there are many other statistics that we might look at in terms of congregational life and the diversity in congregational life, representation on boards, things like that. So we knew that this was essential to us and that we needed to move in this direction. But again, not sure of all the questions. And I listened a lot, and we came up with a few strategies. We surveyed clergy. We focused upon diversity in youth, the recruitment for ministry, rethinking the ordination process, providing funds so that people could go to seminary, and cooperating with you all in the Polly Murray Scholarship, so that for clergy wannabes of color, that they could have what's needed to make it through 3 years of seminary. We've planted new churches that provide us greater sense of diversity, and that's going to continue as we look at the diverse population that's in Texas, as Texas itself is leading the nation in diverse populations. This gives just some small sense. Today, we're at 31% of the clergy are women. We hit over 40%, and then I don't know what happened. So I think there were some retirements and some things like that, but we're ordaining about 50 and 50%. So my sense is that over the next decade, we'll eventually catch up, and it'll be much more of a balanced unity across at least that perspective. Oh, sorry. And to say that we're over 9% clergy of color today, which is exciting. That's more than double what the Episcopal Church has, but we've set the goal to represent the world around us, right? So it's not really enough to look at those numbers in relationship to the church. We need to look at them in relationship to the wider community. And so we continue to hold that up as a goal for ourselves and seeking to reach it. We have a lot of folks in discernment, and through both seminaries and the Iona schools, helping to do the work of raising up folks. And some people can't attend a 3-year seminary, so the Iona school has become a wonderful seminary experience in which they can do that work. One of the goals that I forgot to mention is that we did an audit of all of our boards so that we can begin to raise the diversity in our boards and institutional boards. We also are looking at ways to raise up clergy of color from within the diocese. So trying to strengthen our connections within congregations so that we can do that. And Bishop Monterosso, kind of a lead conversation partner in that. Another one of our goals was to be younger, right? How's that going for us, huh? I think this really came out of that deep sense of wanting to of ministering to youth and young adults, right? It came out of a real heart sense that they're important to our community. And I think we wanted to, in that moment, we wanted to do better. This is really a difficult time, though, right, on this, because there's so much changing in the lives of young people today and their own commitments to parts of whether school or sports or other activities. And parents, I don't know, I mean, we just are now empty nesters, but keeping up with all of them, it's not at all like it was when I was growing up, and possibilities. And so how do we actually minister to that rather than seeing that as a stumbling block? Like, how do we minister to parents? How do we minister to the youth in that situation, rather than figure out how do we make that stop so we can go back to the 1950s and 60s, right? Like, so that's the task, right? And it's so difficult, so hard. Now, what we've done with this is to focus a little bit on younger clergy, because we do actually know that younger clergy will do better at ministering with younger people. That's not always true, but it actually, it helps not put "the" in front of the internet and all the other things, So we actually need people who can speak the language of youth, right? But the other thing was that we felt like that we had to put money back into the ministry program. So youth ministry we've been taking money out of the budget. And part of that was trying to keep your assessments, what the parish gave to the wider church. We had to try and keep that lower. And so that was they can't hear me on the live stream. Hello, live stream. Can you hear me now? I've got this space, makes me talk softly, I think. So I'll try also to talk louder. Can we get some feedback? Is that better? How are we doing? Yeah, is that better? Okay. I should talk louder because we're not younger. That's really funny. Anyway, let me go back to, we began to try and rethink how we do resourcing of youth ministry in parishes. Again, not like we have the answer, but how do we actually work with you? And how do we share? I know the other bishops do this quite a lot, as well as the Mission AMP team. How do we share what we see working in other congregations with you, right? So we don't have necessarily answers, but you have the answers, and how we can share that across the diocese is really important. We continue to have a full-time youth person. We did winter time retreat as a diocese. People were really burned out, and so we just kind of a precursor for the future. And then the last thing that we're working on right now is we're doing a formation audit. We'd like to know what works and doesn't work in your congregations, both with young adults and youth, but also with adults. And so we feel like getting a hold of what we need to be providing and how we can resource you all into the future is a big part of undertaking this desire to have younger people be a part. One of the things that's been reflected to me a lot is the online Bible and book studies are huge for young people. So one of the things that I heard a lot from young people in the previous visits on this have just been an affirmation that going online has not been a bad thing for many of them who are eager to have conversations about books and church, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that we also did was to invest in campus ministry. And so we're going to look at a little bit of what the results of that are. Today we spend a little over $1 million on youth and young adult formation in the diocese. And our average age of clergy has moved from 48 to 43. So that's very good. So here are our college campuses. We have 80 possible sites across the Diocese of Texas. We have gone from 9 to 21 during our episcopate together, which is exciting, but we have a few more to go. And this is going to take congregations, I think, beginning to build relationships with the universities nearby. And we're going to need to expand programs. So, for instance, UT is huge, it's massive, and we have one ministry that is trying to imagine how to multiply itself. So we have a lot of work to do and to learn, but the Episcopal Church does very well on college campuses, and we are still missing out predominantly on the HBCUs and on the community college front, where tons of youth and young adults go. And we could really be a pastoral support to those folks as they're going through their own education and asking big questions. So this, I still feel like out of all of the things we could do, this still remains one of the most important and vital pieces of ministry that we need to invest in over the next 5 to 10 years. In January, we created a new leadership and endowment that has and have living expenses without creating debt for them. So that's going to completely change that. Thank you. It also will leave about $1 to $1.5 million a year for us to help you with your Christian formation. So it's going to be able to do both of those things. We just want to figure out what's the best way to help you, as opposed to just funding kind of one-off things. So we're going to take a while to figure this out, but pretty soon, probably within the next year or two, we'll be able to start funding formation work in the wider part of the diocese. The question was serve our neighbors, and I have to say the Diocese of Texas has always had a heart for ministry and service, for outreach. I think that this piece of this aspirational out how to update it. In other words, there were still a lot of food pantries when I started. There were some parochial schools and daycare centers, and there were some clothing closets. But there was a sense that there was more to do. We just needed to figure out how to do it. So our strategy was to sell the hospital system. We felt like when the opportunity came that we needed to take that, and together, and I mean that together because it really took leaders from the whole diocese along with me, we accomplished together something that had never been accomplished before. 4 other bishops had tried to sell the health system but could not. We were able to pull this off, and today that means that we help the regions of the diocese, there are 57 counties, by putting $35 million into clinics and access to health care and children's brain health and development, all kinds of stuff, because we were able to do that. And that has also allowed us to build into that a congregative group that will come and work with your congregations, not only on the stumbling blocks that we often have around racism and our concern over immigrants and all of that kind of stuff, to kind of help us understand how we might be one church together serving out in the world as partners with our neighbors for long-term development and not just short-term one-offs. And a great example is the One Human Family, which came out of St. James itself and was here long before EHF, but we've been able to share that with other people at I, beginning to do some other work there. So lots of good work on that front as well. And all right, covered that. So here's the Austin Convocation. Between 2018 and 2021, the Episcopal Health Foundation alone, just the Health Foundation, gave 212 grants totaling $24 million and worked with 9 area. Okay, so this again, it shows rather than having resources kind of tied to one geographic center, what we've been able to do is unleash that into the wider church who want to of reaching and serving neighbors, seriously be part of the neighborhood to do so. And Christ Church Cedar Park was one of the examples they wanted me to share with you. And they participated in activating community voice workshops and resulted in Christ Church developing and coordinating a significant mental health support network in their part of the Austin area. So just the kind of amazing new work that you all are doing now that you have some resources and people who can partner and be present with you in that ministry. Together across the Diocese of Texas, we as Episcopalians make up less than 0.25% of the people. We impact 14% of the people who live in our 57 counties. Right? Yeah, that's really amazing. And that's on you. That's your work. That's your work. And it's exciting. And we think at 20% or higher, because we haven't yet gotten to a place where we can measure the actual impact of a local congregation on their surrounding area. So we're hoping in the next 5 years to be able to measure that a little bit more so that we'll have a base number from which to try and grow our greater impact. But what I can say is, and I said this from the very beginning, the state of Texas ought to be better because Episcopalians are here. And right? And I think we're doing that. I think we're doing that. Yes. No, that's what I'm saying. We can't even count that. We haven't counted it. We've counted lots of other things, but there are lots of things we haven't counted yet. You see? So that's not counting that. Or if you opened up and got food for people during COVID, we don't have those numbers, right? So that's the amazing part is, I started when Bishop Ryan and I first came up with this idea. Boy, wouldn't it be something if we could touch the lives of 1% of people in our 1% would be amazing. And then we're like, okay, we counted up 3 organizations. 3%. Let's go for 3%. We just stopped counting when we blew through that. And so we did some research and were able to come up with 14%. But like I said, I think that's just the beginning. That's not at all what we do. And I hope that just gives you a sense of humble pride that somehow you are representing our Lord Jesus to the people in your communities. And realizing it's not about getting them actually in the pews. It's really about being neighbors for one another. One of the aspirational goals was to help us grow, and we were out of money and didn't know how we were going to do that, but there was a sense that we needed to grow back in 2008. It's part of kind of our identity, I think, and there was a desire, but we really were facing a bunch of stumbling blocks there, and our strategy was to do a couple of things that I think are very important. And one, and probably the most important, was to recognize that the mission is not a church-centric mission, right? That the mission is God's mission, that God intends to love the world and reconcile the world to God's self, that God is interested in the relationship with all people, and that we have that particular revelation of Jesus Christ and Jesus' love and Christ's love for the world, and that all of God's mission to undertake that has a church, not the other way around. And that focus and rethink, we could then open ourselves up to come up with and think about many different ways in which we could plant churches. So we would continue by planting 3 churches a year. That was a goal. We would start planting missional communities and small communities, allowing things to kind of become planted seeds, right? Set in the ground that could come up. Today we have 60 of those. Satellite congregations. We have one in Austin, one in Georgetown, and one in Tyler, Texas. So the idea that churches could plant their own churches and that we could discover what that was about and that we could support them. And so what we did was we created an endowment with $130 million in it and used the interest off, the 4% off of that to plant churches, support our campus missions, and we're seeing a huge planting a church ministry. We have 16 planted so far. It shows you the different stages that they're in, which is kind of insider church information. But as you can imagine, it's like living room, maybe a little bit bigger space, maybe some shared space, and a little bit maybe into a borrowed church or something else. So just think of that kind of growing and rolling as the church builds up itself. We plan to have 30 by 2025. Now, I will tell you, not every church makes it. But that's why we have to plant 3 a year. Because if we don't plant more than we think will make it, we don't have room for failure, and we can't learn. So the big test for us right now is to celebrate failure. Yeah? So we announced that Incarnation in Austin would close, one of our church plants. And the proof in how well we're doing will be how will we celebrate Bryn and that work that that group of people did, and how will we welcome them into our new congregations, how will we celebrate them, right? Right? Yeah. Like, how amazing and brave and courageous to try and start a church. And the commitment from us was will not be a dampen on your life in ministry. And, you know, she believes it. So we got to like ante up there and say, man, we love you, Bryn, and you're going to be okay. This is amazing. And I got to visit with them. They've got a couple more Sundays and they'll close, but I was there last week and we had an amazing, amazing time together. So a little bit of transparency. We're getting towards the end here. Just so you know, we've driven down the assessment from 16 to 18% down to 4 to 10%. We believe in order for every congregation to have a chance at survival into the future, we actually have to lower the cost of doing business as much as possible. And if we have the power to do that, we need to do it. And so as the Diocese of Texas, we've been lowering that. And also to support local congregations, not just church plants, to assist in stewardship programs, which we're doing, and to make the most of our investments in capital. And so we now are working with Hall Capital as a unified investment group, so that whether an organization who invests with us has $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, they actually can be part of a $1.6 billion investment group. And this allows a much steadier investment pool. Our lows will not, I mean, there are going to be lows and highs, but it will not be as low as the rest of the market. And so far, it's outperformed, bringing in over 10% last year. So we have some participating funds that allow congregations to participate in that, and we are happy for them to talk to you. They couldn't be happier right now because a lot of places have them in small little banks because that's what was available. But we need to take advantage of our corporate size in doing this work. And I said we were going to do it, and the finance group said, okay. And they did it. I couldn't have done it. I'm an art student. I couldn't have done that. But I knew we needed to do it. It was great. And so it's just kind of some of your team down there at the diocese. They're amazing. So this gives you a sense of what money comes into the diocese. That's your diocesan office. So this is me and the other bishops. This is the financial office. This is the youth and young adult ministry, the mission AMP group. So that's all of that group, communications, all of that. The 2.6, which comes into the diocese, largely comes in to support the financial staff from the endowment. So while we have an investment team that's outside, we still have a lot to say grace over, and we have to be responsive to our auditors, right? So that just takes more people than I could ever imagine need to do that. And then the 7.1 is that 4 to 10% assessment that you all pay in. However, we're giving back to the existing congregations $9 million a year in grants of different kinds, right? So you invest 7.1 and we make sure that 9 comes back to you in a variety of forms. This gives you a sense of our overarching goal. This was created by accountants. It has pretty pictures on it. I can tell you what it is. And so the orange is your income as an aggregate for the whole diocese, and you see that it's going up in general. But you see that we are taking a smaller and smaller percentage as that aggregate grows, which is really important. Because whether or not your congregation actually sees increased income or does not, we need to take less. So we're trying to do more on less and to create ministries through other forms so that it's not a burden to you all. This is so tiny that even I can't read it, But what it basically shows is that between 2017 and 2021, the Austin area received $8 million on top of the EHF money, so this is separate, $8 million plus for grants to existing congregations for your work. In January, we also created a $200 million insurance fund. In 1960, the congregations had to start paying insurance. And so there was, at first, the congregations paid the insurance for each clergy person themselves. Then it became a reality that not every congregation could afford to pay their clergy insurance. So the diocese basically created an assessment formula so that together we could cover all this. And we offered clergy and family insurance for a long time until that became prohibitive because of the costs that you all were bearing. And then we decided, we figured out a way to create, I asked the Attorney General, I told the Attorney General how we would use the money from the sale. And one of those pieces was an annual $5 million gift to cover clergy insurance for the diocese and the diocesan staff. But what's happened is, since that happened in 2014, insurance has continued to rise. And so, once again, congregations have started paying money on insurance. The $200 million will be used just in the same way, with 4% rolling off on an annual basis, building up so that we can use anything above 4% will go back into capital so that we can keep pace with the rising cost of insurance. But beginning this year, all clergy and their families, as well as the diocesan staff, will receive full coverage. And you, as parishes, will no longer, ever, in perpetuity, have to pay this. So along the way, we had some emerging needs. I felt, after listening, I've told this story a number of times, but after really being gifted with amazing people in this diocese who walked me from the very earliest days up to this point regarding diversity, we did our racial reconciliation, racial justice and reparations project, where we set aside $13 million to begin to give away finances back to historic black colleges, historic black churches, and to provide scholarships for people of color at the seminary, as well as to drive seminary programming around diversity and racism so that we could have better prepared students for the future. And this has been an amazing thing. It happened before George Floyd's death, which enabled us to be ahead of the conversations and be able to pull some resources out. I want you to make sure that if you're interested in this, come and look at this when I get it up online, because the online version will have the list of the first 50 or so individuals we gave grants to for scholarships at historic black colleges. So it is an amazing, amazing program, and I'm grateful for everybody who helped me understand close during COVID. We made sure that if you needed help with the set, whatever you needed, we could do. And so we were providing, we ended up providing about $5 million to underwrite you all as congregations for during COVID, so that we could move through that, including the tech grant. And right? I mean, I'm like, man, I just got over Harvey. So we created a $10 million Cofield disaster fund. We need cash immediately, and this is going to allow us to hit the ground as soon as a disaster happens. Whether it's a tornado, fire like in Bastrop, hurricanes, whatever it is, we can get on the ground and get moving. We have a great team, and you all are amazing in the number of houses. I mean, we have gutted and cleaned and restored hundreds of houses in the Diocese of Texas because you rolled up your sleeves and did this work. I mean, it is amazing what you do. Who have we become? The wrap up, and then I'll stop. And you can ask questions. I don't like to talk about who we've become. I like to visit on Sundays and to be with you and to celebrate who you are and what you're doing. And after 14 years, there's so many friends that I see when I come to visit a church, and so I get to catch up, get pictures of kids. I mean, like, this is a pastoral relationship, and the more pastoral it gets, the better it gets for me, okay? But we run a business too, and it's unfair for me to not share with you the work, not that I do, but that we do together, so that you understand the work that Bishop Ryan does, that Bishop Fisher does, that Linda Mitchell does, that Andre and Sarah and all of the people, Haley, all of the people in our diocesan staff undertake on our behalf. So we are 5 foundations with 54 board members who oversee the dissemination of 4% off of about $1.6 billion a year. We have 118 board members serving these institutions: El Buen, St. Vincent's, Camp Allen, St. Stephen's, Episcopal High School, and each one of the bishops is chairman of one of those boards. There are 74 separate members across the committees and commissions of the diocese. There are 321 separate interdependent organizations. So that's St. James and St. David, but El Buen Samaritano and St. Stephen's and an endowment here and a project there. So it's massive what we undertake. There, we employ together 300 clergy and 700 lay people, full-time employees across the diocese. And that means we give, in 2019, we added it up, we contribute over $170 million to local economies. So we have a huge footprint, and this is why it was important to do the COVID work, to help you get PPP loans, to help you all keep people employed, because families depend upon the Diocese of Texas for us to show up every day and for our churches to open up and for us to employ people. This gives you a sense of comparison. In EDOT, we have 71,000 members. The average diocese has 18,000. Baptisms, EDOT on an annual basis does 1,000 baptisms. Most dioceses have an average of 212. We do 1,000 confirmations a year, sometimes bumping up to 1,300 and 1,400. The average of the other churches in the Episcopal Church is 140 annually. We did more confirmations 2 weekends ago, you all, than most churches do all year. Most dioceses do. It's just the nature of it. Attendance, EDOT has 57 congregations greater than 100. TAC has 76% of the congregations smaller than 100. Average pledge, 5,100, 3,000. This was an outstanding, crazy number. The Episcopal Diocese of Texas has 6,000 school children, while the rest of the Episcopal Church runs on an average of about 1,300. So what are we going to accomplish over the next 5 years? 100 new missional communities, 15 church plants, formation programs that are funded, trying to think about average weekly attendance and new ways of counting. We want to measure our congregational outreach and to continue to figure out how to decrease the cost of doing business in the local church. One of the pieces is that we think that'll fit nicely within our creation care, where we could actually begin to look at new technologies that would drive down the cost of electricity and utilities and all kinds of things. So we're embarking over the next year on a creation care piece, but one that would include grants and the ability for congregations to get help and specialized help with to bring down some of that cost. So what I guess I want to say to you is that we're a very unique and kind of odd place, and it's wonderful. It's amazing, and the work that we're doing is outstanding, and I think we're in a really good place, and we need to continue to press forward and learn on all of these kind of aspirational areas about how we can continue to become more and more the kingdom of God. So I'll stop there and just invite you all to ask questions or not. There's one question over here, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to stand up and support. I wanted to stand up and support the idea of congregations working together.
Yeah.
Because we've been working on that, and it's great to have us working together, and it's a lot of fun.
It is.
It is, because you get to meet a bunch of new people with new ideas, and so we definitely recommend it, and we're working on it.
Oh, that's fantastic. We just had a big weekend in common with a bunch of congregations gathered together, but as the Mission AMP group, our old congregational development, rethought around mission, as they're doing that work, the more and more we can get people together, the better. We're better together. And the resources you all bring to the table are amazing between congregations. So thank you for doing that, and would love to continue. I hope we'll see more of that. And then right here, yeah, let's get you a microphone so everybody can hear.
Well, Bishop, we would like to invite you to St. Matthew's next Saturday.
Oh.
The Love Notes are going to sing.
They're going to sing?
Yes.
Wow. What are they going to sing?
A lot of
Should I bring my banjo?
loving songs.
A lot of loving songs.
And you will be amazed what these people are doing, and they're doing it for the church and the whole community.
That's great. That's great. Are you part of this group, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Self-promotion, baby. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but it's good, and you were talking about things that we can do as a church.
Yeah, that's great.
And this adults that have problems.
Yeah.
And we are working with them. And it's really growing pretty good. We've had 2 concerts already.
Oh, wow.
They've been really good.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Great ministry. There in the back, there's a question. Oh, and then we've got one over here, too.
Bishop, you mentioned already tornadoes and hurricanes, and we're going to be having more and more of those.
Yep.
So the question is the diocese doing anything to prepare for the effects of global warming over the next 50 years in terms of like retrofitting our existing physical plant or influencing construction of new churches?
So the question was about, are we retrofitting or thinking about how we can prepare for the future where there'll be more disasters based upon the climate? Yes, that's part of the creation care work that we intend to do. Here's what I've learned, though, and it may be different in all size organizations, but the Diocese of Texas kind of has the wherewithal to focus on one thing at a time as a group, okay? So you think, oh, well, we're really big and we can do this. No. Actually, we would be more than happy to run off on creation care and leave racial reparations and justice behind. So I'm unwilling to take the pressure off of doing the racial justice work in order to do that. And so what will happen is I've got to appoint a committee that will begin to look at all that. It's a very complex issue based upon rising sea levels and flooding in the southern part of the diocese to how we can get people off the grid. And it's not enough to, I mean, you all could just go get techs if you wanted to, but the cost for all of that, we can't just say that we're gonna do something. We actually have to do it. And so it takes planning and setting goals. How many congregations do we want to beta test? I mean, we're gonna have to really, we got 321 separate organizations. So it's not just a church, not just this church, it's all the churches, and it's the schools, and it's this, and it's that. So yes, but we want to do it well, and we want to think through the process, we want to build capital to achieve our goals, right? So yes, I'm 100% behind all of that, and we're on it, but it's going to take us a while. We'll start rolling out some little things here and there, but it's going to take a while. I mean, right now, we don't even know the deferred maintenance on our congregational buildings. I mean, you all don't know. The vast majority of you don't know the deferred maintenance on your building. And so it's hard to say, let's retrofit this and that when you're just going to blow it outside one of these windows because it's not sealed correctly, right? So we're actually have hired a company that will go around, and that's the first stage. So we want to help you. If you don't already have a list, we're going to make a list of everything that needs fixing, because we've got to start moving in that direction in order to take the next jump, right? So you've got to, so yes is the long answer. So thank you. And you can hold me to account on that. So when I come around in 5 years to do this again, and if it hadn't come up and you don't see it, you say, Bishop, I was here and I asked you. So you'll have to go to church for 5 more years.
Bishop Doyle, could
Yes.
you take a moment to reflect and maybe talk about the impact of bivocational ministry, both priesthood and deacons, for the diocese, and how that's been part of this big picture, please?
Certainly. So just to talk a little bit about bivocational and diaconal ministry in the Diocese of Texas, we're fortunate to have been, as a group, to have received a vision from Bishop Payne that was then articulated as a greater vision through Bishop Wimberly, and that and Mary McGregor and others. And what I would say is that bivocational ministry has enabled us to provide sacramentalists for our congregations that have not been able to afford priests. Vision of bivocational ministry. And I think that's still a big piece. We continue to look for recruitment, and certainly our bivocational clergy are now retiring. Some of those first clergy are now retiring, and so we need to replace them. And the diaconate has been a very strong movement, but one of the big issues is the age of the deacons. Now, that's not something I'm saying is an issue. It's something the deacons are saying is an issue. There aren't enough younger deacons coming along to do that work. And so we have a lot to figure out as the program continues to mature. Vocational priests, that this has been a real gift to people. I do think that we have to sort out, in part because other dioceses pay a little bit for some of this work. I think we're going to have to face that. And, you know, the problem is that can get expensive really quick. But that doesn't matter. We actually just have to figure out. And part of the reason is we ought to be able to provide insurance benefits to them. And if we don't pay, we can't do that. Now, listen, you all think, yes, right. This thing is the naughtiest of knots. It is insane because of the church never imagined this. And so the pension and insurance don't work this way. So it's very complicated. We've been working on this for years. But whether or not we have to set up our own separate insurance or something, we now, with the $200 million endowment, have the capacity to solve this question. So hopefully over the next 2 years, we'll be able to bring some into that. We don't have to pay a lot. But then again, some people, I think if you want to, the problem is this, we take advantage of these folks and they love it, so they don't mind giving it. Next thing you know, somebody who's supposed to work 12 hours just gave you 40 for free, right? So we're also undermining the stewardship of the communities as well. So we just need to, that's just a problem to be figured out. And yeah, we'll do this one and then we'll come back over here.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Okay.
It's good to see you.
I just want to really commend you all church plants. I was brought up a very traditional Episcopal person, and I belong to St. Joan of Arc in Pflugerville. We are a church plant. And I will tell you that that lives in this area come here. No. We're starting from scratch, and we're meeting people where they are and with what they need. It's a very fulfilling experience, and I thank you for supporting us.
Oh, yeah, our pleasure. Thank you for saying something. So the question is, how important is the ministry to Latinx community? How important is that to the church in general? And what is the place or our voice, perhaps, our prophetic voice in the issues regarding immigration? Yes? The Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Texas has no future without Spanish-speaking congregations. And we can add the other diverse people, the Africans and the Asians, but most of all, our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters. The numbers are just present. Texas are losing 1 to 8% of the population every year to death with no reproduction. And the numbers coming from the rest of the country will not be enough to lift up that growing population beyond the numbers of Spanish speakers and people from around the world who have come to Texas for the same reasons that our settlers did, right? Hope, opportunity for a job, so maybe things would be different, and they haven't been. So yeah, it's very just know how important the conversation about diversity and racial reconciliation and justice work is. And this is our future. When Ben planted the first Spanish-speaking congregation, and this is not, it's not a, I'm going to be really careful. It's not so, we love people to our neighborhood. Now, you all, I know. And partly just because that's what Jesus does. Right? I mean, like, sit here and listen to me be bishop. I mean, come on. It's not a political game that we're playing. In that passage today where Mary washed a morsel of food and a living that they could make, maybe to send back money to their, like, you can have all kinds of what I'm saying is just don't pretend like the politics from out there are the politics that go on in here. So we have to reorient ourselves to having a different conversation. So immigration is a disaster in this country. And you may not know this, but I've been speaking out on it for my whole episcopate, calling for every immigration reform, and I'm not sure we're going to see it now, because I don't think that the people in Washington want it. They don't want to give it to the other side, and so that's my view. And you can take it or leave it. Unfortunately, y'all are stuck with me for another 10 years. Over there is another question. And then that's going to be it. I want to be good stewards of our time. And let's go over and have some fun together next door. So last question.
Thank you, Bishop. I want to thank you for your quick and definitive response to the latest thing coming out of the state of Texas, which is the issues surrounding children, young people, and their parents, child abuse, you call it, and all of the panoply of issues that are related to that. I'm interested in your thinking behind that, how you processed it, and how you can help us to process the response. Because those of us who work with young people in schools particularly feel the angst.
So you're talking about the trans. So this is how I processed it. God loves everybody. And the church isn't going to be a place, and its schools one another for loving LGBTQ people, period. It took me about 5 seconds to process. Texas, and it doesn't. It still doesn't today. So I want us to be very careful of it. Like we have a responsibility to run our schools and deal with those things, but that's not what this is. This is politics, plain and simple. And let me be really clear. We're just not turning people over from our churches, period. I don't care who they are. That this is a sanctuary. Now, the lawyers will tell us all about immigration, all that kind of, it doesn't matter. I've got your back. So if somebody walks in here and claims sanctuary, then we're going all the way to the mat on sanctuary, okay? So that's the deal for us. And as a church, that's been the historic way in which we have approached. Now, not every Christian entity has always done that. But there are plenty of Christians who stood up and hid Jews and gay people during World War II, and we will be the church. We will be the church that does that if we have to in this age. We are just not going to turn people over. That's just insanity. So hopefully as school teachers and people, you felt some relief there, but that's terrible. My heart just goes out to you. It's this attempt to employ, to make you all report on brothers and sisters in your community. That's terrible. That's a terrible thing. And then the poor parents who have trans kids, and then the trans community. You know, Texas, especially Austin and Houston, have the largest trans communities in the U.S., continental U.S. You might not know, Houston's one of the largest. So this is a powerful issue for many people in our churches and in our communities, and I think they need people to stand up and to say that they're with them and going to stand with them. And that's a scary thing to do at a time like this, but it may be what we're called to do. Okay, we should go have fun now, right? Thank you so much. You are the best. Kay, will you give us a blessing and maybe send us out?
Thank you for your ministries. I look forward to seeing you all when I come around, but it's good to be with you today. Let us pray. Go into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Love one another with mutual affection. Love and serve the Lord. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be amongst you and remain with you and those you love this day and forevermore. Amen.